Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular City Council meeting for Thursday, August the 17th. If you'll please rise, Reverend Willie Robertson with Macedonia Baptist Church will lead us in our invocation. Reverend Robertson, good to see you, sir.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we do love to call you our Father because it makes us so consciously aware of this eternal and special relationship you've allowed us to enter into, whereby we know you as our Father and you own us as your children. As we come today, we have so much to be thankful for. We really don't know where to start, but we thank you most of all for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, who has made salvation available unto us. Our Father, we come pleading your special attention to be paid unto this gathering today, these servants who've given themselves over to serving this community, to bettering the life of all the citizens and all the residents hereof. We pray your choice blessings upon all of the city employees and all those who reside and who are citizens of this temple community. Father, we just thank you for being so tolerant of us, for continuing to look beyond our faults and provide and supply all of our needs. And we come now confessing that we need your wisdom, we need your guidance, we need your special insight, that we might make the right decisions that affect and impact the lives of all of the citizens of this community. Lord, we thank you for so many things. We pray now that if you would you just please send us some rain. And in Jesus' name we ask it all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Willie. Aaron Gaines, one of our children's librarians, will lead us in Pledge of Allegiance. Aaron?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Willie, before we get started, last night I heard the shower on, and I got excited thinking and hoping it was rain, but it was just a shower. So, we do need the rain.
Well, we have some proclamations that we have to do tonight, but fortunately they're all the same. So, if I could ask Judy Dewar and Aaron Gaines to come forward, please. You want to tell us a little bit about the program that you had going on this summer, and then I'll present the proclamation. You want to use the mic? Well, here, let's just see if we can get you going in the right direction. Excuse me, I want to put a new battery in. I think it's going to work. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you may or may not know, we lost our children's librarian right as summer reading started, and Erin joined us right as we finished, so we're very happy to introduce her as our new children's librarian. She comes to us from the Fort Bend County Libraries, where she was a youth services specialist, so we really like that. She also is a Temple native, and I understand used to be a neighbor of yours. So we're very happy to welcome her home. We had a great summer reading program. We were one person short, but everybody pulled together. We had 1,542 kids signed up to participate. Everybody came back with their logs and got signed off every week. And the reason for that is the folks that we're honoring with these proclamations who made donations of coupons and prizes for our folks. So as always, it's a community effort, and we appreciate it.
Hang out of the microphone for a second in case there are comments. I'll read the proclamation. We have a number of people that we're thanking tonight via this proclamation and honoring for their support. And as I read your firm's name, if you are here representing that company as an individual that it really helped to make this program what it was this summer, if you'll please come forward. Whereas the City of Temple is very fortunate to have numerous local businesses, corporations, and institutions who willingly participate in a worthwhile community project, especially those projects which benefit our children. Whereas many of those help to sponsor the Children's Summer Reading Program at the Temple Public Library through their generous donations of weekly coupons, underwriting performers, and the final party support. Whereas it is an honor to recognize those businesses, corporations, and institutions who acknowledge that reading is a basic element of education and the foundation upon which young people learn to enjoy rich, full lives and become productive, successful citizens. And whereas our community is fortunate to have so much support and generous participation in a program which encourages our young people to read. And now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, with great pride do hereby recognize the following for their support of the 2006 Children's Summer Reading Program: Action World Bowling, Applebee's, Arby's, Aunt Anne's, Baby Cakes, Cactus Jack's, Chick-fil-A, Chili's, Cece's, Cotton Patch, Dairy Queen, El Chico, Fast Eddie's, Fazoli's, French Quarter, Golden Corral, Great American Steak, H-E-B No. 1, IHOP, McLean Group, Maggie Moo's. Good. Mazio's, McKeska's, Mr. Mike's, Pizza Hut, Schlotsky's, Scott and White Hospital, Shipley's, Sonic Drive-In, Taco Bell, Texas Roadhouse, Texel Federal Credit Union, Walmart, Wendy's, Whataburger, Wilson Art, and Ye Old English Bakery. Let's give all of these, but particularly those who came here this evening, a great big round of applause.
And we do thank you all so much for all the support. It makes a lot of difference to the kids.
Hey, since we just have a few here, let them tell which business that they represent, if you don't mind. We'll pass the microphone.
I'm from IHOP.
The Temple Pizza Hut.
And I'm from Texel Federal Credit Union.
Great. Good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And we'll make sure the rest of these get mailed.
Hey Judy, I want to, every time you're up here, I want to say I got a voicemail from my daughter tonight. I'm supposed to go by the library and pick up some books, and we benefited a lot from those coupons all summer long. So I appreciate all that y'all do.
And Aaron, I want to welcome you home. I know your mom was glad you're here. Yeah. You were a great babysitter when my children were little.
And I did bring these statistics.
Oh, well, just pass those out. Great. Judy, thank you for all you do for our city and running a great library. We appreciate that. And Aaron, welcome to Temple. We're glad to have you home. If this was home, that's great. And we're glad to have you with our library staff and the city. So best wishes to you. Thanks. Wow. Okay, next item on our agenda is the opportunity for public comment. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may sign up to do so prior to the meeting. Public comments will be received during this portion of the meeting, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. No discussion or final action will be taken by the council. And we have one person signed up to speak, and that would be our chair of our P&Z, Ms. Susan Long. Not P&Z? Well, I know you're not here to talk about that, but that's who you are. For us.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm here representing the Friends of the Public Library. This is library night, apparently, and Tony, we're glad your daughter sent you an email, or your son. We are having our annual book sale, and the dates of the book sale are Thursday, August 31st through Monday, September 4th at the Temple Mall, as always. We are deeply indebted to the mall management. We lost our space that we were going to have at the last penultimate moment, just before we were boxing and moving. And we really didn't know what we were going to do. And Trish Lee at the mall came through and talked Sander Construction into helping us out. And they have constructed us a gazebo in the food court. We love it. We're going to stay there forever. We hope, we wish. But we are going to have a wonderful book sale this year. We have more books than ever. I know I've told you that for the past 2 years, but we do. We've got great history this year. We have a wonderful military history section. We have a wonderful biography. And we have everything else we normally have. So please come. Come and spend money. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The next items relate to the budget and tax rates. And item number 4 is a public hearing to conduct the first of 2 public hearings to receive comments on the proposed tax rate of 57.34 cents per $100 valuation for fiscal year 2007, that's the 2006 tax year, and announce meetings to adopt the proposed tax rate on August 31st of 2006. Mr. Blackburn, you will start us off on this one?
Yes,
Okay.
sir, Mayor, I'll start it off and
Okay.
then hand off to our finance director, and we'll be available for any questions. If you give me the next slide. I'll go very quickly. I only have about 4 or 5 slides. As council's aware, we've had several meetings and discussions relative to your upcoming budget. Those are the key dates that are remaining in the budget calendar this year. Of course, August 17th tonight. In your work session, we had a discussion of budget and CIP. You're having your public hearing tonight, also scheduling and announcing a meeting to adopt the tax rate, and that's set by state law. The 24th, a week from tonight, is the second public hearing, and then final public hearing on the 31st, along with scheduled adoption of the budget and adoption of the tax rate. Very quickly, I just want to re-emphasize the policy that we started this budget process with. And those policies are what I call fence posts or guidelines that we use to develop that from a staff standpoint, were to estimate our revenues low and our expenditures high. We followed our fiscal and budgetary policy statements, and in particular, providing you with a balanced budget, which also incorporated our surplus fund balances, but only for capital items. And then we also looked at fees and rates, and the policy and the process that we followed with that was that those should be reviewed by administration with an objective to recover costs wherever we could, but ultimately council sets them. General priorities for your upcoming budget were first, continuing the implementation of Phase 2 of the 0506 Compensation and Benefits Plan recommendations. Council may recall that we did a very comprehensive compensation and benefits study last year. We implemented Phase 1 of those in this fiscal year with an understanding, or at least an opportunity to implement Phase 2 in the next budget year, subject to funds being available and our budget process and going through that. This budget does reflect those Phase 2 recommendations. Addressing increased costs in fuel, increased costs in utilities, we've talked about that extensively also. We have tried to address those issues, as I've mentioned in the workshops and in the public meetings. We think we have addressed those in your operating budget for this upcoming year, but we are there's not a lot of margin built into your budget relative to those costs. We're trying to estimate those as best we can and not be excessive necessarily in those cost estimates, but by the same token reflect what is happening out there in the economy. But those are certainly challenges that were represented in our operating budgets this year. And then finally, maintaining our current program and service levels. The budget was intended to reflect overall an emphasis on maintaining current levels of programs and services, with really more of an emphasis this year on our very significant CIP process that council has had, again, extensive discussions on. But those were the general operating policies or procedures that we went into this budget with. Next slide. Very large picture, just to give everyone an opportunity to see how our expenditures go for all funds. About $88 million, a little more than $88 million. More than half of that is the general fund. The general fund, of course, is where most of our basic municipal services are: police, fire, our solid waste services are in the general fund, animal services, parks, all of the things that you might typically think of when you think of city services, general fund. The next largest fund, back one time, is our water and wastewater fund. That's a rate-based fund, which means it's supported not by taxes, but by rates. And so your water rates and your sewer rates are what pay for the expenses associated with that fund. And then there are half a dozen or so other funds that make up all of those expenditures. And with that, I will stop, turn it over to Tracy for some comments relative to your tax rate.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Miller?
Yes, thank you. As tonight's item relates strictly to the public hearing regarding the proposed tax rate. I'm going to focus my presentation on the tax rate and the tax roll for the FY 2006 or 2007. Currently, our calculated effective tax rate for FY 2007 is 0.5568. We're proposing a tax rate of 0.5734. That rate has two components. One is the maintenance and operation rate, which is 0.3395. The interest and sinking rate is 0.2399, again total 0.5734. With that rate applied to our current tax roll, the total levy is $14,970,102, and last year's tax rate, FY 2006, was 0.5745. Just how does this proposed rate compare to our rates over the past 10 years? As David mentioned earlier, the parameters fence post we worked within to present the budget for this year was 2.98% greater than our effective tax rate. As you can see, that's pretty much been the trend or fence post in the last 10 years, with the exception of 2 or 3 years. And also noting that the proposed tax rate is the lowest tax rate since, I believe, in the past 6 years. I printed this too small to read it well. It's too far away.
Since 2000.
Since 2000. How does the City of Tipple's proposed tax rate compare to other or local geographic peer cities? Noting that the City of Tipple's rate is the one proposed for FY 07. The other cities are the proposed or actual rate for FY 06. As you'll note, we're fourth from the bottom. Ones below us are Austin, Round Rock, and Georgetown. Next slide. Our assessed value of taxable property within the City of Temple limits is $2.6 billion. That's an increase of 6.42% over the previous year, and our average increase over the past 10 years has been 4.28%. Total market value, the composition of that within the city limits, 42% is single-family residential, approximately 37% is commercial industrial, and 12% is totally exempt. New market value added to the tax roll this year, the total market value was 89.8. The amount of that was taxable was 79.8 million, and close to 2/3 of that, or 65%, came from new residential single-family housing developments. The taxable value compared or applied to our tax rate, just an example, if you had a home with a taxable value of $100,000 and apply the proposed tax rate of 57.34 cents, what would be your taxes? If there's no change in your taxable value from the previous year, it would be an annual decrease of $1.10. If your home increased by 3.51%, which is the average increase in taxable real residential property within the City of Temple, your annual taxes would increase by about $19. That concludes the presentation related to the proposed tax rate. I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Council, any questions or comments prior to going into the public hearing? There are none, or nothing else from Mrs. Seckman. Okay. This item requires a public hearing, and I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. If you care to speak before the council on the proposed tax rate for 2007, please come forward.
My name is Marvin Hurd. I live at 14 West Welton. And I was down the other day on the budget, and we discussed the things, and I didn't commend the city manager and Tracy for a good job on the budget. I've gone back through, and I want to get the changes that has been made. We made some changes upstairs. and we made some changes about the new parkway and different things. And I don't know how we're going to get it out to the people, the changes that have been made. So we need to. The tax rate, 57.34, that's okay with me. I think along with this budget, we're going to see a rate increase in our water and also solid waste. I don't know where it's been averaged out right yet or not, but it will. And another thing, when I was going through on the internet about the different changes, what the amount of money that you're going to spend for the $10 million CO, you had a whole bunch of different buildings that need new roof. And I'm wondering if they've been put off, just like you talked upstairs about having you in. If some of this stuff has been put off, and now we got a CO worth $10 million, and we're going to do it. But that's a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of roofs that need to be replaced. And I think we need to probably do some of them along the way instead of waiting for a CO. I said what I thought about the GO last time. Still stick the same thing. That's about all I got.
I think your comment last time was on the GEO.
Okay. That's right.
Was on the GEO, not the
GO,
CO.
not on the CO.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Marvin. Thanks as always for your attentiveness and your work with us in the budget. Is there anyone else would like to come to speak on the budget tax rate? Seeing no one wishing to speak, let me read this statement. That there will be another public hearing on August 24th of 2006 and again on August 31st of 2006, at which time the City Council will vote to adopt a tax rate. Both meetings will take place at 5 p.m. in the City Council chambers, second floor, in the municipal building at 2 North Main Street. Next item is item 5, and this is a no action item at this point. It's just to conduct the first public hearing and to read that statement. So item 5 is to consider adopting resolution directing publication of the notice of the city's intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation, CO, Series 2006, in an amount not to exceed $10,255,000. Ms. Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is to begin the publication requirements for issuance of a certificate of obligation. Once this resolution approved tonight, it will be the first publication of the city's intent to issue COs the week of August 28th. The next publication, second required publication, will be the week of September 4th, 2006. And we plan on awarding the sale of the COs on September 21st. You'll recall, and we've had many discussions throughout the budget process related to the multi-year CIP proposal. This year, the proposed budget includes a significant multi-year CIP proposal totaling approximately $82.1 million. The 4 components, actually there were 5 components, but 4 major components. The proposed CIP includes COs, which this item focuses on, and then the utility revenue bonds, GO bonds, and general operating budget. The CIP related to the, quote, CO issue included approximately $19 million of available debt capacity, and that was planned to be issued in 2 issues. The first one, $10,255,000, mentioned, would be September 2006, and it would impact FY 2007. Our next phase 2 of that issue would be approximately $9 million, plus cost of issuance to be issued September 2007, and would impact FY 2008. And tonight in the work session, we did discuss of adding phase 2 of the outer loop to that $9 million, the second phase. The use of the funds for both phase 1, phase 2 of the CO issue Broad categories would include construction and improvements to streets, including traffic signals, drainage improvements, improvements and acquisition of equipment for the airport, fire department, service center, parks and leisure services, facilities, police department, solid waste department, and emergency operations center. Also include improvements and repairs to municipal buildings, and gives examples of each one of the various buildings to be receive improvements. Also, a master plan and improvements to the city's information technology infrastructure, a master plan, design, and possible land acquisition relating to the construction of a new fire station #1, admin building, construction and equipping the municipal court building. And these are additional funds to supplement the 2002 GO issue. Also, redevelopment of the downtown area and legal, fiscal, architectural, and engineering fees in connection with those projects. If you'll note, also we discussed, and we will address it at the end of this presentation, the changes we discussed in the work session and how they will affect and impact the resolution. But related to the fiscal impact, the cost of the CO issue, as you'll recall, there was a retirement of a significant amount of tax-supported debt, which afforded the City of Temple the opportunity to reinvest those funds in CIP projects without adversely affecting the interest and sinking component of the tax rate. The amount of additional debt capacity was associated with the retirement of the quote old debt was approximately $19 million. The average annual debt service is around $881,000, and this assumes an interest rate of 5.25% with a 20-year maturity. The INS portion of the tax rate that we just discussed, of 0.2339, includes the debt service to services CO issue for FY 2007. Just another note, included in this issue is the purchase of communication equipment, and this issue is broken out the par amounts in two separate amounts, one for $965, the other for $9.2 million. The radio equipment has an average bond life of 6.6 years, and the remaining amount of the CO par amount has an average life of 14.44 years. Before I introduce we have our financial advisor, Dan Wigmiller with First Southwest, and also bond counsel, Carol with McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton, and Pete Tart couldn't make it tonight, but I want David to address the amendment to the resolution to address what was discussed in the work session.
Thank you, Tracy. Actually, I think the item or the suggestion that I have with regard to the resolution is related to item 5. I'd be happy to take that up now or address that now, but also happy to wait until we get to item 5. I think, I'm sorry, flip over. If you look at the second paragraph on page 2 of the resolution, it begins with a project list by department and function is attached.
It's under item 5.
Yes, under item 5. Right item. It says project list is attached, and then behind that, of course, you have the attached recommended projects for certificate of obligation. As I mentioned in the discussion that you had in the workshop today, and based on the council discussion that you had earlier this evening, my suggestion would be that you modify, or not modify, but add a couple of sentences into the resolution there, something along the lines of, and I'll just read what I was scribbling out in the work session there, that the attached project listing is intended to represent the current listing of intended projects. These projects are subject to change, but only with council approval. And my intent on that is just to give certainly council maximum flexibility as they go forward with these 2006 CIP projects over the next several years. And as I indicated in the work session, my intent is that you'll be reviewing these projects annually, at least annually, as you go through this project. And while there's certainly no intent to or effort to deviate from the project listings that we have proposed to you, I would recommend to you that you provide at least some flexibility, but only with council approval, that those projects be changed. So that is what I would suggest, just in terms of some additional language, just follow in the resolution attached.
Should that identify phase one or phase two more specifically, other than just, should it?
No. I would keep it very broad, and not necessarily related to that particular project. My intent or suggestion to you is that that language covers not related to that specific project, but the entire project listing.
That language would allow the flexibility to do the shift, like we talked about, that possible, that little bit of funds from the courthouse that would pretty well balance out with maybe moving up that Avenue M project.
Correct.
From the second year to the first year.
Correct.
And so within the structure of that language, we'd have that flexibility to do that.
I think with Russell related to,
I'm
that is
I'm
correct.
related
Phase-
to the,
I understand.
to the outer loop in it. And I think there would need to be some specific language in that.
Yes, that
Otherwise,
absolutely, and it's appropriate. I don't think there's anything inappropriate necessarily tonight. If the project listing that you have, if you want to amend that based on the discussions that you had earlier today, that's fine. Also, my intent, and I think that's along the lines of what Mr. Snyder's indicated, my intent is also, again, as I mentioned earlier, is to bring this project listing along with the GO and the utility revenue project listing back to you on the 31st, so that you can also look at them again with similar language in the resolution.
So is there any need tonight to then change this from a $19 million CO made up of these projects to change it to basically a $22 million CO to include the second phase?
I think so.
and could we identify specifically on that project list, phase one and phase two?
Yeah, let me take one at a time there, and
That's right.
as the financial advisor starts rustling through the the intent, what you're authorizing tonight is the
The 06
0607 dollars, and the project listing and the modifications we're talking about don't relate to the notice of issuance or the debt instruments or any of those documents. So those are all fine and don't need to be modified necessarily. The changes that you might want to make relate to the project listing that covers 07, 08, and in particular the 08 project list, and modifying that amount. And again, with the language that I suggested in the cover resolution, I certainly don't think there's any problem with making that adjustment on your project listing. It doesn't change the financial documents or the financial action that you're taking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, as long as
that makes sense.
as long as the project listing for what's on phase two for 07, 08.
So basically adding the additional $3 million to that list for in the project listing, but not having an impact on what we're voting on the issue tonight.
That would be important for the action on the 31st.
Correct. I think just for information-wise, this project listing, it's attached to the agenda item, but nowhere is it attached to anything related to the resolution of intent to reimburse. The one thing that we did want to make note of, and just note it in the minutes, is council's discussion in the work session to change in FY 2007, which is included in the $10,255,000, switching the monies from court renovations to the resurface of Avenue M. That we did mention that would just be noted in the minutes. But the resolution related to the intent to issue covers, broad categories covers that.
And it also attaches that list.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
But the key
What
here
about
is-
what about when you call phase one and phase two? Does it attach that schematic that we had as well? I mean, or can that be it? You say phase one and phase two, I mean, something's got to attach that too, right?
We'll,
Or you do it in
Not for tonight.
text.
We'll try to modify the description or the descriptive component of your project listing to make sure that that's there, in addition to having the cost number modified also, so that'll be reflected also. But again, I think that's, again, certainly fine to make those motions and to make those changes relative to your project listing. You'll see that again on the 31st.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the council?
I just would like to say, I think the thing that's very important is the specification of the 07 to 08 years. You know, so when we're talking all these different numbers, that the year is specified that it's 7 to 8. And that's 2007 to 2008, okay?
And that'll be a different series
Right.
from what we're talking about this evening. Is that correct?
That's,
But we are, to clarify, on the 31st, we will vote on the entire CIP list, including both issues. Well, we're, I guess, voting on the first issue tonight, but then the 08 edition of the, basically the additional $3 million to the outer loop on the 31st, correct?
And that'll fall in the 08 column.
I like that. Correct.
okay.
Yeah, I just don't want to be redundant, but I also want to make sure everybody's
I
clear.
want to make sure, I want to make sure.
The August 31st meeting, I intend that you'll have several items for action on there, budget, tax rate, and several items. But one of those items, my intent is to provide you with a resolution adopting a 2006 CIP program. And that program will have the 07 and 08 columns for the CO, utility revenue, and the GO proposed projects.
And the CIP listing will have the new verbiage, which includes what we talked about this afternoon, to include both phases of
Yes.
of that particular item.
Yes.
Okay? Everybody good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Dan, are you okay with that?
Head of the eraser out there.
Do we need anything from First Southwest on this item or on the next item?
This item,
Okay.
which I did,
Okay.
and from legal counsel also.
Okay, great. All right.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wegmiller, welcome.
Mayor, Council, it's always good to be here. I'm Dan Wegmiller with First Southwest Company. Also here tonight, Jennifer Douglas with First Southwest, and Carol Palumbo with McCall, Parkers, and Horton, a partner in the Austin office who works with Pete Tart as well. Just to give you kind of the follow-up timeline that Tracy and David have touched on, we will be going to bond rating meetings on August 29th, less than 2 weeks away, to give them a general overview update of the City of Temple, your programs and plans for the future. And I'll just note that this will be very well received, that you all are doing such extensive planning for the future, and you really have a grasp of what you need to do, what you want to do, and that's something that's always viewed favorably by them. The market is very good right now. We've estimated 5.25%. If we sold today, we'd be selling under 5%, probably closer to 470. And so we don't anticipate major movements between now and then. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions or turn it over to Carol to touch on any of the notice items.
Thank you, Mr. Wegmiller. Ms. Palumbo, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Carol Palumbo with McCall, Parkers, and Horton, and I'm here actually just to answer any questions you have. I think as mentioned, we have the resolution in front of you that starts the process for us to publish the necessary notice in the paper twice to start the issuance of the certificate of obligation process. And we do have the list, as we've discussed, I think that works in conformance with the council's intent of the projects. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Council? Thank you very much for your work. Appreciate your help with this.
Tell Pete hello.
Council, if there are no other questions or comments, this item requires action.
Motion to approve.
And it requires a second to move it forward.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to consider adopting the resolution directing publication of the notice of the city's intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificate of obligation, Series 2006, in the amount not to exceed $10,255,000. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Item 6, consider adopting a resolution authorizing First Southwest Corp. Company to prepare the official statements to proceed with the issuance of combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2006, in the amount not to exceed $10,255,000, and the official statement for the issuance of $21,265,000 waterworks and sewer system revenue bonds, Series 2006. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As mentioned, this is to begin the process of preparing the official statement. The official statement, and for two issues, as you mentioned, the CO that we just discussed, and then $21.2 million wastewater revenue bonds. Next slide. The official statement, or OS, will be used by bond rating agencies, including Moody's Investors and S&P, to assign a credit rating to the city's rating to the bond issues. The potential bond investors, prior to bidding on the bonds, will use the OS to become familiar with the city's economic and financial position and also assess credit quality. Again, earlier I just mentioned with the COs, the reason we have this opportunity, perhaps, without adversely affecting the interest and sinking component of the tax rate. We discussed that earlier. Next slide, please. And the 20.2339 cents is included in the proposed tax rate. Next slide, please. The waterworks and sewer wastewater system revenue bonds we propose and in our CIP planning includes $40.7 million of revenue bonds to be issued in two separate phases, just like the COs were broken up for $19 million between 10 and 9. The first proposed issue is $21.2 million to be issued September 2006 with debt service in FY 2007. The reason we're issuing these bonds are to fund improvements to the water wastewater system. Our project list, which is attached to your agenda item, includes 21 water projects for an estimated $25.5 million and 21 wastewater projects for an estimated $15.2 million. The average annual debt service on the proposed revenue bond issue is approximately $1.9 million. Again, that assumes an interest rate of 5.25% with a 20-year maturity. How do we intend to pay for these, the additional debt service? This year we engaged the firm of Reed, Still & Yonke to update it was RW Beck, to update a 2003 rate study. The 2003 rate study recommended a rate structure that would generate, with the revenue requirement, approximately $3 million for pay-as-you-go capital improvements. The new revenue requirement uses some of that $3 million to apply to debt service, but continues with the $1.2 million in pay-as-you-go projects, capital improvements. And it also included the increased operating cost associated with fuel, utilities, and chemicals. With the proposed rate increase to meet the revenue requirement to service this debt, we're recommending a 5.9% increase to the water minimum bill, 8.2% to the volumetric rate of the water bill, 9.4% to the wastewater minimum rate, and 9.8% to the wastewater volumetric rate. Again, Dan and Carol, we're here to answer any questions and address items related to this, issues related to this item.
Okay, Mr. Blackburn?
Mayor, can I make just two quick comments? The first one is repetitive of the comment I made on the previous resolution, which is I would again suggest that the resolution, the cover resolution for the project listing, just be modified slightly to include a statement that the attached project listing is intended to represent the current listing of intended projects. These projects are subject to change from council approval. My second comment would be just to highlight on the one of the slides that Tracy mentioned, the 42 projects that are being proposed on utility revenue bonds. I would categorize 37 of those 42 projects. That's okay, I don't need that's the slide. But 37 of those 42 projects are what I would categorize as rehabilitation or reconstruction of existing infrastructure. In other words, we're going back and trying to take care of the system that we have in place right now. So it's very intensive in that sense. There are a few projects that are that I would categorize as extensions of the system, and those are important also. And I hope over the coming years, as we better address maintaining and rehabilitating our current system, that we're able to shift more of these dollars into the extension of our system and growing our system, which is also something we very much need to do. But this first issuance this year, at least in the 06, is very heavily focused on rehabilitation of our existing system.
Do I recall correctly that several years ago when we did the Reed Stowe study that we were designing a rate system that would basically replace our existing system over a period of 50 years as a given, but then TCEQ came back in and basically told us that wasn't good enough, that we weren't replacing it quite quickly enough, and that's driving a lot of what we're doing, and some of our funding increases are as a result of regulation that's causing us to move faster than we originally intended.
Sure, that's correct. In really several of your CIP list, or in additional CIP list, not just the utility revenue list, bond list, but TCEQ did review the initial proposal, I think that was put together maybe a year or two ago. Mr. Butcher, a year or two ago. We did receive some feedback back from them that that plan was not acceptable and that we needed to be a little bit more aggressive in our planning process. Mr. Butcher and I went to TCEQ a couple of months ago, I guess. I gave them a briefing on what was being put together and presented and proposed, though not adopted and certainly not in a position where we could say it was going to happen, but we said this is the direction that we are proposing and recommending, and that council discussions have been very favorable up to that point. The comments we got back from TCEQ at that point were very favorable. They were very impressed with, especially on the water and sewer side, which is the main area of interest for TCEQ, but they were impressed with the work that had been done and were encouraging us to move forward.
Great. And could you just go back a couple slides, Alan? I think that's where the rates, that one right there. Okay. Mr. Hurd, is that really what you were addressing in your comments, just about the amount of the increases for both the water and wastewater, and just making sure that that's highlighted and it's out in the open that there is a rate increase associated with the adoption of this budget, and that here are the amounts. So, okay.
I do have one question on the study that was done in, I guess, 03. We did it specifically though also recommended a series, Tracy, a series of rate increases to help us to keep us in line with doing that 50-year replacement cycle. Did it not?
Right, it did have a 5-year, it was a 5-year study to address the revenue requirement for 5 years.
But we did not
No, we
increase
did not.
rates. So we had a 50-year replacement plan with rate increases to meet that, and then we did not increase the rates per that plan.
Yeah, but we were also meeting the revenue requirement, because it was just based on an estimate with the current rate structure, so we saw no need to increase the rates when we were meeting the revenue requirement. I think also those were some years with maybe unusual below average rainfall, which increased the revenues within that fund.
As well as the growth in the community and the additional
Right.
hookups that we've seen
Correct.
over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I would just say I don't think that the city's not following the rate plan or the rate structure that was set forward in terms of rate increases, but still meeting the revenue requirements, was really a factor that influenced, at least in the discussions with TCEQ, that wasn't an issue.
I just want, were we on track to continue to, to even meet the schedule that we had put on? And I guess with additional, then you have to come into the whole factor of drastically escalating costs. So.
I think the public needs to know, though, that there is going to be an 07 revenue requirements, and here they are.
Other comments or questions on this item? Otherwise, we'll have Mr. Wakeman come up. Okay. Mr. Wakeman?
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing I would note just on the revenue portion of this is one thing we're pursuing, and we visited with staff for quite a while on this, is a modification on the revenue bond issue to the covenants or the requirements when you sell revenue debt that you're going to do certain things, such as maintain a reserve fund. You're going to charge rates sufficient to pay your commitments. Those covenants throughout the industry are modified throughout the years. But once you sell one issue of bonds, you lock in what you're going to do. What we're proposing to do on this issue is pursue closing out basically the debt that you have outstanding on the revenue bond side, issue at a different level, not on the same par level as those bonds, and modify, because you have a significant capital program coming, modify some of those covenants or requirements to pretty much update. And the one primary one I'll just bring to your attention here, but hopefully we'll come back when we have the bond sale final and cover everything that we've been able to modify is traditionally revenue bonds require an average annual reserve be created and maintained through the life of the issue. So for 20 years on this size program, through both issuances, you would have roughly $3.5 million in a reserve fund just sitting there, yield restricted, where what you earn on it may be restricted over the next 20 years. Well, since your prior bond covenants were created, some have moved to what is called a springing reserve, which means if you maintain a sufficient coverage level, if you maintain sufficient financial condition in that utility, you don't need to maintain that reserve. And then if you fall below certain levels, which Temple has not come near those levels, you would put that reserve in place. What it does is it frees up that $3.5 million. We're going to be talking to rating agencies, insurance, and investors about it, assuming it's received well, which we hope and anticipate it will be. We'll come back and bring a little more updated version of that covenant.
So, am I to understand you that you just said basically we're planning on doing some refinancing of previous issues at the same time?
Well, actually, no. What we will do is we'll leave those old issues alone.
Okay.
And we won't. What we call it is we close out that lien. We will never issue bonds on a par with that level. If we ever want to refinance those bonds for savings at any time, we would pull those back under the new requirements that we put in place with this issue. But at this point, we'll have two tiers. But the ratings, one of the big keys is that the ratings on those two tiers actually either marry up together or the closed out portion will maybe have a higher rating than it is right now. So the key for us is we'll evaluate it and make sure it's not an economic cost to you to make these changes. If there's not, then we will pursue. If there is a cost to you, then we'll pull back and go as we usually do.
Okay. Other questions from the council for Mr. Wegner? Ms. Palumbo, anything else to add? Council, this requires a motion for adoption of this resolution authorizing the official statements to proceed as read, and with the language that Mr. Blackburn suggested, providing the flexibility in the structure of the project. Is there a motion for that item?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 6. Further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Next item is to move into the consent agenda. Folks, thanks very much. Mr. Wegner, Ms. Palumbo, thank you very much. I had a feed for us. Take care. Bye, Jennifer. Next Next item is consent agenda. All items listed under this section, consent agenda, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member and will be considered separately. Council, are there any items that you wish to remove from the consent agenda?
H.
Okay. Item H, I'm going to ask that K be removed for a short presentation. Any other items? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for approval of consent agenda, items 7A through L, with the exception of item H and K.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second for item 7. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Item 7H, consider adopting a resolution authorizing a one-year renewal to the contract with Perry Office Plus for the purchase of office supplies by the entities of the Central Texas Purchasing Cooperative in the estimated annual amount of $450,000, with Temple's estimated annual expenditure to be $95,000. Ms. Meskey?
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor and Council. City of Temple is a member of Central Texas Purchasing Cooperative, and we were the lead agency and brought this to council last year for adoption. And we are just looking to renew this for an additional year. We had two additional one-year renewals that we could bring forth, and all of the entities are satisfied with the services that we're getting from Perry Office Products, and are recommending that we extend that for 1 year.
Thank you, Ms. Meskey. Any questions? Entertain a motion for item 7H if there are no questions.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second for item 7H. There's no discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Item 7K, consider adopting a resolution approving the third quarter financial results for fiscal year 2006. Ms. Bernard?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we went over this in detail in our work session. I may go through this pretty quickly and just focus on the general fund. If there's any additional information or areas or funds you want me to go over, please let me know or stop me when you need to. Next slide, please. Getting with the general fund, these are the financial or the third quarter financials for the City of Temple for the period ended, which is 9 months, 6/30/06. 75% of the year is complete. Total revenues for the general fund are currently at 86.47%. Some general fund revenue highlights. Again, we've discussed ad valorem taxes, the levies October 1 become delinquent February 1. Collections as a percent of the levy as of June 30th are 95%. Prior year they were at 96%, but I want to note that we had an error in our tax roll, and the 95.33% does not reflect that adjusted roll. And if that was adjusted out of the roll, we would actually exceed our collections of the prior year. Also related to ad valorem taxes, spoke many times this year about we had an outstanding lawsuit that has been settled, agreed judgment issued by the judge. That total refund will be approximately exactly $310,967. Those taxes were actually paid, so it will need to be refunded. And as I mentioned earlier, the error, the taxes were never paid, so no refund required. Just adjust the roll. Next, sales tax is about 28% of our total budget. We're projecting a 5.54% increase over the previous year. Our 5-year average growth is about 3.53%. If the current trend continues, which there's only 2 reporting months left, we should end the year about $1 million ahead of our budget related to sales tax. And that is consistent with previous years in our budgeting philosophy related to sales tax. How does the City of Temple compare to the regional cities within our region and also the state. We're at 6.66%. The lowest is Killeen and Waco. As you see, Georgetown, statewide cities, all across the state of Texas, including every city, are at 14.28% above in sales tax where they were a year ago. Just I'd mention some, Carol, next please. A quote from our comptroller: that state and local governments continue to benefit from economic growth, strong business activity, and consumer optimism in Texas. Again, we went over some of the, and these are excerpts from a publication from the comptroller's office, just some leading indicators that they publish, I believe each quarter. What I want to just point out is retail sales are up 6.6% statewide from the fourth quarter of 2004 to the fourth quarter of 2005. And also one of the leading next slide please. Indicators that's published in the comptroller's report is statewide housing permits are up 13.3%, and I think that same activity is going on in Temple, Texas, and our sales tax revenue reflects that. General fund expenditures, 75% of the year complete. We're at 72.39%. Just some areas to watch in our general fund. Fuel cost, we discussed that several times. We've monitored that closely. Utilities, we're going to be bringing forth some budget adjustments for electricity, natural gas, and water. And those budget adjustments are reflected in our forecast that presented tonight. And that's our weekly fuel pricing. Next, please. To note, our general fund balance unallocated designated for capital project today, as of August 17th, sits at $1.2 million. Next slide. Quickly go over our forecast. We're projecting revenues to be 106% of budget, expenditures at 98, other financing sources at 99, and end the year and add $3.4 million to our fund balance. How does that, where does the $3.4 million come from? It's revenues that exceed budget, sales tax, interest income, franchise fees, landfill contract, sanitation revenues, other revenues of $340,000, which $221,000 is related to a lawsuit settlement with TXU, and another is $66,000 related to bulletproof vest refund settlement we received. Expenditures less than budget, $736,000. The majority or all of that is related to salary lag, unfilled positions, and personnel costs, and also some savings on our insurance. Noted the operation is negative. Again, we adjusted to reflect future budget amendments we'll do related to fuel cost and the electric gas. Next, without going through all these numbers in detail, if you'll note, the fund balance was at $1.2 million. We'd add the $3.4 million at the end of the FY, bringing that balance to $4.6 million. We have the adjustments that are identified related to some increases, some decreases. Brings our balance at October 1 to $3.9 million. And as we mentioned earlier, we're proposing to fund $1.3 million of capital in the FY 2007 budget from those funds. It would bring the balance to $2.5 million. Just, you have to continue with water and wastewater fund, or?
That's general fund. What I wanted to cover. Thank you, Ms. Bernard.
Thank you.
Counselor, if there are no questions or other comments on that, I'll entertain a motion for approval of item 7K.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second on item 7K. There's no discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Mr. Menard, let me just say, again, as we typically do, thanks to you and your staff for the work that they do in preparation of our financial statements. You always do a great job with the presentation, and it's a lot of work in putting all this together, day in and day out, but certainly for our coordinators. So thanks
Thank
to
you,
you and
Mayor.
the staff for the work.
I will have to pass it to the staff. I'll pass that on to the
Great group of gals, thanks. Item 8 is a first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the abandonment of the north 150 feet of the alley located in Block 51, Original Town, between West Avenue E and West Avenue F, and between South 7th Street and South 5th Street, and replacement with a utility easement with a length of 150 feet and a width of 20 feet. Ms. Larley.
Hello. I put an aerial up on the screen just in case people had problems identifying by the paper format where this was located. And this is actually the First and Third Street curve where it converts from Third Street to First Street in this area. This is West Avenue E, and this is West Avenue F, and then this is South 5th Street and South 7th Street. Temple Independent School District is requesting a partial alley abandonment. They're only asking for the portion to be abandoned that is abutting both sides of their property. They own the property on this side of the alley and on this side of the alley. This is a 300-foot long alley, and they're only requesting the north 150 feet of the alley. And because they're only requesting a portion of the alley, this is only going to be a proposed abandonment for a 20-foot wide by 150-foot wide alley abandonment. We notified the abutting property owners on this block, and we did have opposition from the property owners to the south for a full alley abandonment. That is why we're not proposing to abandon the whole alley. They are not opposed to the abandonment of the north portion. This is an active alley, so the property owners to the south do use this alley, and they were in favor of leaving the south portion open. We do have a property owner at 512 and 514 South 5th Street that was opposed to the abandonment of the north portion of the alley because he said that he uses the alley entrance at the north to bring in some 16-foot long trailers through to his property, and he said that he could not use the south entrance because of the city dumpster at the south end, and he said there are ruts in the alleyway. There are utilities in this alley. We contacted all the utility providers. There's a gas main, there's PXG varied facilities, and also aerial facilities. Southwestern Bell has some facilities, and we have a wastewater main. Everybody was in favor of the abandonment as long as we retained utility easement so that they would have access to those utilities. Along with a utility easement, in the event that this does get approved, the utility providers ask for 24-hour access to the utility easement. TISD is proposing to fence in their property on both sides of the alley, and so the suggestion was made from AT&T Texas that they use a gate with locks, keys and locks for the utility providers. And so TISD has agreed to coordinate with the utility providers to provide the 24-hour access to the utility easement. If this portion is abandoned, then TISD, since they are the property owners on both sides of the alley, they would be allowed to purchase that alley portion for the fair market value of $1,125. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
The gentleman at persons that own the property at 512, 514, that have the need to bring in those trailers. Is that something related to their business? Is it occasional? Is it something that's, on a regular basis?
I believe it's something that is on a regular basis.
So how does that affect their operation?
Well, I mean, Mayor, that's my question. Can we move the dumpster and fill in the ruts? I mean,
Yeah, if that's,
that's the only
sure.
two things that he had talked about were hindering him from being able to use that other entrance. I mean, it's pretty easy to fill in the ruts, and the trucks are going to have a hard time getting back there anyway without it through, won't they?
The solid waste department, is that what you're referring
Yes.
to? They do not use the alley. I contacted the solid waste department. They actually only access dumpster services on the south side. They do not use the alley. Their truck will go in and retrieve everything from that dumpster on the south end.
So we can just move the dumpster and fill the ruts in.
Do we have the opportunity to move the dumpster? Can you go back to the aerial photo
Sure.
you started off with, please? Can we see that?
I believe that it's in this area right here.
Okay, so does it look like it can be relocated to where we can have access to that, to empty that, and yet and open that alley up?
The solid waste department would be willing to work with that. I mean, they would have to keep it in that location because that's what they're using now, but I believe the reason that he was hesitant about it was because of the ruts, but if the alley was improved, then that would not be an issue for him.
They're gonna replace the paving and I assume they're gonna pave across it. They're redoing their lots and buildings there and cleaning up that area.
Yes.
And if they're gonna do that, have them fix the ruts. I mean, you're not talking about much. They probably have waste material anyway as far as gravel or base if they're gonna improve that entire alleyway. So, if they would fix the ruts and be a good neighbor, I think that'd be a great deal.
You're speaking of the school district?
Yes.
When they close out?
They're currently doing that now.
Oh,
What they want to do is tie each property together to make it more accessible and try to clean up all the vines and debris. And I mean, it's going to be a positive for that area, but there'll be some old base there that will have to be wasted. So just repair the other remainder part of the alley as a good neighbor and go down the road.
That's something you can coordinate.
Mayor, I was just going to say, we'd be happy to, between now and next reading on this item, we'd be happy to explore both those areas, both the location of the dumpster and the ruts in the alley.
Great. Appreciate that. Other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Lowerly. Appreciate it. If there's no other discussion, then this item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council?
Motion to approve if the alley can be made accessible for 512 and 514.
Do you want that into the motion?
Well, I wouldn't want to approve it if it's going to hurt someone.
Well, there's another reading.
Okay.
That would, if there was some reason that it couldn't be done, we didn't pass the second reading, then that
Okay.
would
Well,
fill
motion
it
to
as well.
approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second to approve the first reading of this item for the closure of the alley, the north part of that alley. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Item 9 is the first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from two-family district to Office 1 district and an amendment to the South Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect office uses on Lot 10, Block 5, Terrace Garden subdivision located at 1601 Avalon Road. Mr. Mabry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome, sir.
This case was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission on August 7th, and after a 6-2 vote, the commission recommended approval of the zone change and of the amendment to the South Temple Plan. Here's a zoning map of the area. The yellow shaded in portion is the subject parcel. It is currently designated, as you've seen in the intro slide, as 2F, two family. Behind it is and Office Park, Canyon Creek Office Park, and it's designated O1, Office 1, which is what the applicant is requesting right now. To the south and west is Neighborhood Service District. Meadow Village Apartments is here, and it is zoned general retail, and that is directly across 31st Street from the subject parcel. And in effect, this would zone change, if it were granted, would be extending the O1 district into this lot from behind. Here's a front view of the house as it is now. It fronts on Avalon Road, 1601, and 31st Street runs to the side, as you can see in the picture. This is a view of the house from 31st Street, and Avalon being over here where the arrow is. And finally, this is a rear view of the property with, there's a 6-foot privacy fence running along the side and the rear of the property. The applicant has submitted a concept plan that it's labeled site plan on your application packet, but due to it being a straight zoning application, we can't really request a binding site plan. This is what he intends to do with the property. There's provision of parking spaces. Here's the fence along the perimeter and around the dumpster pad. And this is labeled retail building, but it should really say office because, as I'll explain in the next slide, any kind of retail wouldn't be permitted in the O1 district. And there's proposed landscaping on this concept plan along 31st and Avalon.
Go back to that. What's that down below the lower right-hand corner, the dark gray? Is that right there? What is that?
It's labeled existing telephone structure.
Yes.
Oh, that's not a parking that's not an additional approach or anything like that?
It looks like a curb cut for access to the telephone structure.
Yeah. It's not a driveway or entranceway.
No. So as I said, in the office district, what's permitted in that district are general offices, medical and dental facilities, child care, schools, and churches. And what is not permitted is any kind of convenience store or restaurant or something of that nature, or anything above that in intensity. The existing structure also, as it is, meets the area requirements for that office district, area requirements being things such as the setback and the maximum height that's permitted. This is the future land use map for the area from the South Temple Comprehensive Plan. As you can see, the area that the lot is in is designated here as medium density residential here on the side, and the surrounding and across the street properties are designated neighborhood and community retail. So that is why an accompanying plan amendment would be required in order to grant the zoning for the parcel. 15 notices were mailed out to surrounding property owners within a 200-foot radius of the property, and 5 were returned in all. 4 were not in favor of the zone change, and 1 was in favor of the zone change, as you can see in the D's and the A's on the map. And at this time, I'd like to invite Susan Long, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, to come forward and provide the recommendation of the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mabry. Ms. Long?
Mr. Mayor, council members, to reiterate what Brian said, at the August 7th, 2006 regular meeting of the P&Z Commission, we held a public hearing to consider this zone change request and the possible amendment to the South Temple Comprehensive Plan. There were 8 commissioners present. The vote was 6-2, with 6 people being in favor, 2 being in opposition to this zone change and the amendment.
Thank you, ma'am. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Mabry or Ms. Long before we go to the public hearing?
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem
No.
first? No.
Nope.
Did the people who voted against it give reasons?
No, those reasons are not in the minutes.
Mr. Bader, could you tell me what the proposed business in that area is going to be?
The proposed, and the applicant is here, but the proposed business, to my knowledge, is going to be a type of general office that would be permitted in the O1 district. And
Do you plan to speak during the public hearing portion? Okay, good. Okay, I'll get to you in just a second. As soon as we-
You can
That's
still
okay.
stand
As soon as it'll be just in a minute, so you don't have to sit down again. But are there any other questions for Mr. Mabry before we go to public hearing?
Can I ask a question? Real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I should ask it over the airways, but is this going to have to be a supermajority since they have so many?
Evidently not,
disapprove and what- is that-
because that usually.
What's that rule?
I think it would need to be a supermajority if the Planning and Zoning Commission disapproved it or recommended disapproval, or I guess if there was a formal protest petition that would have been submitted. But as far as my understanding, and I think I had asked some staff members earlier on anticipating this, I asked them if, due to the split vote, sort of, if it would require anything extra than a regular majority, and the consensus was that it was just a regular majority.
I was concerned about the number of denials of the letter set out. Isn't there some rule?
20, if it's 20% of the area, unless you got some, did you get any new denials after P&Z
No.
received? I think they had calculated that before.
Well, if they did 20% of the number that were sent out, they sent out 16 or 15, and they got 4 back, but.
It's area.
It's the area.
Right. Geographical.
Just for my stupidity, what does that mean? I mean, the area, you say the area, is that square foot area, number of residents in the area?
Square foot.
In the circle.
With the
Square foot in the circle.
So the 200-foot radius.
So what percentage of
The
that?
streets count, and the city didn't oppose it.
So in other words, the Ds, where the Ds are, where those lots are, that area where those Ds sit is not 20% of that total area, is what you're saying? In square feet out there on the graph?
If it is 20%, that takes a supermajority.
Right. And that's the question. So
That's just a
we're
question.
assuming,
Yeah, it's not.
it's a good point, that if
I thought-
Mr. Mabry's saying they ran that trap and we're in good shape, then we're normal rules.
That's the planning department's practice.
Yeah.
When they do the exercise with the circle to calculate it and point that out in the report.
I thought it was a number of actual letters sent out,
No,
if you get,
it is by area.
okay. Learned something today.
Other questions?
People wanting to vote.
If there are no other questions, this item requires a public hearing, so I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak before the council, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Sir? Welcome.
Mr. Stanford.
My name is Patrick Stanford. I'm a real estate broker and owner of Stanford Properties. And I'm just here to answer any questions y'all may have about the property.
Well, I have a few.
Okay.
Obviously, District 3, I protect as much as I can. Can you give me any idea what you plan on doing on that property? Since I've gone and looked it all over and walked it myself.
As you can see on the site plan that I have, the house, you can show the house?
Yeah. Oh, the picture?
That right there. What I plan on doing is taking down the garage, leaving the existing house, which is 1361 square feet, and keeping everything the same. It will have to be re-roofed. And show the other picture, site plan. That one right there. That's the existing house now without the garage. And then it has adequate parking. So it's pretty self-explanatory.
So you say you're going to take out the garage?
Take out the garage.
Oh, really?
knock it down.
Okay.
Yes, to allow parking to the back.
Yeah, okay. Not just close it, not
And what
take
type
it
of
out.
business?
Real estate.
I just want that for the record.
But it could be a small mortgage office, real estate, insurance, anything of that nature. Low traffic.
So do you plan on using any of the
myself? Yes.
You do? You plan on living in the?
No, not living. No, use it for office.
Okay, I was just making sure. Okay.
Tattoos? Just kidding.
No.
You weren't here at the last meeting.
What's that?
Had to be there.
Any other questions?
Okay, other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Skink. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council?
Motion to approve?
Second.
I have motion and a second on this item. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Tyrone?
Aye.
Councilmember Lennon?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Tennis?
Aye. Item 10, first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance repealing ordinance number 2001-2789, which established a policy governing purchasing by city departments, providing that the city council shall from time to time establish by resolution the monetary guidelines for acquisition of personal property or services, including the construction of public improvements and change orders to those contracts. Ms. Bernard?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As noted, this is an ordinance to repeal an existing ordinance, and then we'd like to present a resolution to set the monetary guidelines. But the original ordinance that being recommended to be appealed was adopted on September 21, 2001, and it established the policies governing purchasing by city departments. Just in the last 6 months, and it was a focus group was formed to review current purchasing policies and procedures, and that was a cross-section of the city and comprised of the following departments, as noted on the slide. And the recommendation from that focus group was to change our current monetary guidelines and with some consensus to what we're proposing. But the current monetary guidelines, under $50, it can be reimbursed by petty cash. Under $250, no quotes required. $250 to $999, 2 telephone quotes. $1,000 to $25,000, 3 written bids, and then over $25,000, and over $5,000 for insurance. To comply with the local government code, it requires council approval. Our proposed changes to those monetary guidelines are under $100, eligible to be reimbursed through petty cash under $1,000, no quotes required. $1,000 to under $3,000, 2 telephone quotes. $3,000 to $25,000, 3 written quotes. And again, over $25,000 would not change. And again, this item tonight is the ordinance to repeal the existing ordinance, and then the next slide, please. The next step would be on September 7th, the second reading of the ordinance, and then would present a resolution establishing the recommended monetary guidelines. I'd be happy to answer any questions related to that item.
It's a recommendation by your staff?
No,
your department?
It was the recommendation. We formed a focus group. They discussed the current policy, problems they had with the current policy, and of course it was kind of a agreement to meet in the middle on their recommendations versus what was good purchasing practice, and this is what we've come up with.
So you're recommending this to us, and you think this leaves satisfactory controls in place?
Yes, sir.
And if that Baylor Bear disagreed, she wouldn't be recommending it. Okay.
If there's no further questions, this item requires a public hearing. Ms. Blackburn, did you have a comment you wanted to mention?
I'm just going to concur, I guess, with the recommendations that our finance director has presented through the focus group. And I think maybe part of the focus group's initial efforts were directed or in response to some questions that I had raised with regard to our purchasing practices and our procurement practices, and asked them to step back and kind of take a review of those practices, not to sidestep or in any way mitigate good purchasing and accounting practices, but to try to be as efficient as we could and friendly as we could in our procurement practices, and at the same time, again, meet all of the accounting requirements and purchasing requirements. So I want to thank the focus group and finance for their work on reviewing those and coming forward with the recommendations.
$1,000 is still a lot of money to just allow somebody to go out and buy without quotes.
Again, and we looked at that, a lot of discussion on that. I think so, and Tina might have to help me, is the comments from the focus group is a lot of times when you go to get quotes for under $1,000, it's not saying that you shouldn't shop around and use good procurement practices, but it's not going to, as a compliance issue, require that you physically document those 3 quotes.
Well, I guess the question is, if 2 things: the cost of acquiring those quotes. I mean, there's a burden on staff to go out and get a quote for 3 quotes for $700 or whatever, as well as there's a cost to the vendor or multiple vendors to, if there's in a continuum mode like that. I'm sure that had some of the factor in the decision as well. Correct?
Absolutely. That was one of the main things that the focus group focused on, was the time that they take, and at the current policies right now is anything over $250, and the time that they take to get those quotes is money that they're spending, city money that they're spending, and they wanted to take that into consideration when they raise those limits.
And I'll add too, and Tony, and to answer the mayor's question, a lot of our purchases too that are between the $100 and $1,000 are related to, are purchased off of annual contracts that have been through the bidding process to get the lowest price, and that helps, I guess you could say, negate that risk of, or concern of not getting the best price without getting multiple quotes. Does that make sense?
No. Because we've already gone through the bidding process at that point. You know, so
right, but if
they're not going to go out and shop at all.
No, but
they're just going to select because they were already the low bidder.
Well, let me state it in another way. If you divided our purchases, did a pie chart of the number of purchases within each one of those categories, the category beneath or between or less than $1,000, a majority of those purchases would be purchased off of annual contracts.
Okay.
Is that better?
Well, so we've already done the shopping for them.
Right. We've got the best bid when we're going through making those purchases.
But would that not be true for the under $100 or for any of those, any level?
And I think again, you go to the cost.
So at which
cost
point?
benefit
So at
analysis.
which point? Yeah, there's cost benefit. So there's not many that are under $1,000 that is taking us all this time to go out and shop for them, so that we make sure we get a good price. Since many of them are already on that list, so we're really not taking that much additional time to have to go out and do that shopping.
Yeah.
Which maybe we should do, or have something in there to make sure that we're getting good prices on those items.
You still, I mean, you have time making the phone calls and item just to order it, or if they have it. I mean, so you're getting telephone conversation. What's a telephone quote? What is a telephone quote?
You have to call one person.
You have to call someone and they tell you what it is just over the phone with no written,
That's
and you
correct.
write it down. That's a telephone quote.
That's correct. Written quotes, they have to actually provide you a written documentation of what their quote is.
So that you call them up on the phone, they just send you a fax back or an email or something like that.
Exactly.
So what we're saying no quotes required, and So you had to call somebody and get a price to make sure it was under $1,000 anyways. And then, so it would just be a matter to compare it to something. Would we normally, as a matter of practice, would somebody call, it's just they wouldn't document it? Or would they just call and say, yep, it's under $1,000, we just buy it?
Tina, do you do many buys under 1,000?
Personally, I don't.
Well,
But, I mean, that's the
But they
majority.
do in the departments.
Yes, but that's what I'm asking. Yes, there's a lot of purchases, small dollar purchases, within the departments. That's the majority of the purchases are small dollar.
And they kind of like to get certain items at certain stores that fit the need in their offices, correct?
That's correct.
And that's why this is cropped up.
That's
Like, I like, let's say, I like to go to X store, but the office next door to me likes to go to Y store.
And that's the whole point.
That-
It shouldn't
that-
just be personal preference.
that
It should
could
be
be
what's the best buy for the city.
That could be it.
Okay.
Could I recommend, Mayor, that propose that this is the first reading on this ordinance, and on the second reading, along with the resolution, we bring back more info and more analysis of that to address your questions?
Or just consider maybe a
lower.
procedure that would be managed by general supervision, general staff management or department management that assures, that we are, being prudent in the purchasing practices and that we are getting bids. And it's not left to just personal preference. I like this store, and it's not based on perhaps the best buy for the city and the best bang for the buck.
Well, first of all, it wasn't the best store, it was the best product from that store. It was the product for, that they desired to have in their office, not the store.
Have no assurance.
Yeah, and I'd be happy just to add to that. I think Tracy's suggestion is a good one. I know the focus group had some discussions, lots of discussions on the guidelines that are being proposed. And my recollection, at least of one of the comments that I heard or saw relative to that particular area was field purchases, I think, where we have a particular incident or activity occurring out on the field, say a water and sewer issue or area, and they need to go purchase something, and it might be above $100 but below $1,000. Well, again, from a timing element and a paperwork element and all of that, going through that process, and I may be picking the wrong example, but I think I remember seeing that in the litany of kind of rationale for why it makes some sense. But we'd be happy to propose, and I fully understand and would also commit that we certainly need to continue to monitor any purchases, I don't know whether it's 1,000 or under 100 for that matter, to make sure that we're using good solid practices in the procurement of those goods and those services. But I seem to recall that field purchases and field services were one of the areas where there was some issues associated with the current monetary guidelines. But we'd be happy to provide some of those rationales and make sure that we have sufficient administrative oversight in place.
We just didn't get the opportunity to participate in the focus group, so this is our chance. Maybe a little awkward that, we have to do it in the form of question, but if you'll bring that back, that'd be much appreciated. So.
Also, can you, when you bring the information back, can you break out the number of purchases under $1,000 that are made by folks in the field? I mean, because that's a very broad group of people. I mean, our water and sewer, our parks folks, and all those things. I would imagine they're probably a large, or at least a good majority of those. So that would be good information.
Sure.
Is that a lot of work to do?
Yes.
Well, then I tell you what. Then I guess the thing is for me is this makes sense to me. I mean, it makes sense because of what city manager said, but that we envision people sitting at desks buying things under $1,000, but I don't envision that. I mean, Alan's group and they've got something they got to fix and they're a server thing and they're I mean, I don't envision that there are many scenarios where it's people sitting at desks and saying, okay, this is $490. I'm going to call 3 people. Whereas I think probably, and I don't know, I don't want to put a burden on you or your folks to get this information, but I think it's a lot more where something is wrong at the Salmon Center and they have to go buy something, or at the golf course or whatever, and they're solving problems, and where they may can save $100 on something, they may have just spent $100 in their time and gas and other things. So I don't have a problem with this, and I understand the mayor's concern. And I don't want to put extra burden on you to get the information. So I don't know how, in that respect.
It would be very easy to do that for the purchases with the P card because that's the normal limit for P cards. A single purchase limit is no more than $1,000, so it's very easy to get that type of information. But on a purchase order, it's going to be a little time consuming. But I'll do my best to.
Well, let's skip the purchase order, and because I'm curious to see what kind of purchases. I mean, you can maybe do a random sampling of the purchases that are coming in on your procurement card, and that may give us an idea as well. But I mean, Alan, you have folks that are on the fly that have to solve problems all the time, don't you? And you have to get something.
That is correct. We are always in emergency mode. So, but we are pretty responsible when it comes to saving money. So we know the best places usually to get the best cost and best bang for our buck. So because we do buy that all the time. We might have a printer, we might have emergency where one day we had in Tracy's case, they were trying to get budget books out and the printer goes down. Well, I have to get something right away. And we use our best judgment in trying to establish, even though it's an emergency and I know I have to have it immediately, I try to actually, and so do my people, find the best price a lot of times.
And I think that goes in the confidence that we have in our directors at the various levels, our purchasing departments to monitor that. But I mean, sure, anybody who has the ability to spend money, there's always the chance that they're not going to make the best decision. But overall, I mean, I guess we'll come back in the next time around in our second hearing. But I think that if you had a group of folks, it's a good solution. So whatever information you can provide to make the others comfortable, that'd be great.
And let me ask this question, and this may help to resolve the issue, and that's just a lack of my understanding about who has the authority and the ability to buy things. Can just, and so how much management level involvement is there in this process of somebody buying something for $982, and can just anybody call up and order something for $982, or is there an authority, or does each department control that within there, and there's only a limited amount of people that can do that?
That is correct. The people that have procurement cards are only the people that their department or supervisors choose to have that power. On a purchase order, any purchase order has to be approved by the department head before it even is turned into a purchase order.
So this is limited to people that have P cards?
Well, or have the ability to do a requisition for a purchase order. That the purchase order goes through all the approval levels, as far as even department heads go first, and then if it's over the certain amount, it comes to purchasing, and we have to approve those as well. If it gets to the city manager's level, he has to approve it before it gets turned into a purchase order. So it goes through a lot of approval levels before the purchase is actually done.
Okay.
So we don't have a guy in a truck that can just go spend money.
All right. So a manager basically needs to sign off on that purchase, even if it didn't have a bid. Somebody else is going to get a set of eyes laid on that.
That's exactly right.
Okay, very good. Then that's all I was trying to do, is make sure there was some, oversight on that. Absolutely, please.
I currently require all my people to call me on anything over $100 anyways for purchase. I know it sounds, but I will give them approval on the clock.
That's what I'm looking. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
That's at midnight or 4 a.m. in the morning and everything. All right.
Alan never sleeps.
24/7. So, Mayor,
that's what I'm looking for. Is what's generally the practice is, and if Alan's representative, no, he's not representative.
But are we in agreement then that she doesn't have to go do a lot of?
Yeah, no, I'm not looking for a whole lot of data in that. I'm just really looking for what's our control. Purchases under $1,000, because it can be a lot of money. If it's off a buy list, that's not an issue.
Well, after with 600 employees, how many P cards are out there?
There's probably about 300, and the reason for that is every police officer, almost every police officer, and almost every fire officer or fireman has their own procurement card for travel purposes, so that they were not rushing out the last minute trying to get them a P card. But I would say about 150 current active purchasers with P cards. And we are very particular when it comes to purchases with P cards. We monitor those very, very closely, probably more than we should.
If it's getting the management scrutiny and
May I add one last comment? On the focus group, part of their study included going to other cities, and I know a lot of times we compare ourselves to, what's other cities doing. Most of the or all of the peer cities that we've viewed and taken their guidelines were much higher than what we're proposing. Again, we're not like, want to necessarily be like other cities, but just to let you know that industry standard, the limits are much higher than that. And of course, the focus group would have liked to, thinking they could save more time. That flexibility up to that level, but we had the discussion and agreement that no, we would keep it at this level. If that,
great.
For FYI.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? This item requires a public hearing. I'll entertain anyone who wishes to come before us and speak at the public hearing. State your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second to approve the first reading of the purchasing of the repealing the ordinance 2001-2789. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item number 11 is to consider adopting resolutions appointing members of the following city boards and commissions. We have a litany of them. I think it's like about 11 different boards that we have appointments for. Several may have reappointments, those that are eligible for reappointment and wish to be reappointed. This could get a little cumbersome here, but we have some boards that we may not fill the positions tonight. We just have no one that's available or indicated an interest to serve, but we have a number that are. So we can just take these one at a time and go through these, and as quickly as we can, we'll get them done. Airport Advisory Board, 3-year terms. The Airport Advisory Board meets quarterly. We have 2 terms expiring. Greg Wazinski and Perry Cloud, both eligible for reappointment. Have we not heard from Mr. Wazinski? So the recommendation is to reappoint Mr. Perry Cloud at this point. And then we also have 3 individuals who have forms on file. If council, you wish to recommend any one of these 3 for appointment to the Airport Advisory Board, we'll consider that at this time.
I would like to recommend David Patterson.
For Airport Advisory Board?
Yes.
Okay. And reappointment of Mr. Perry Cloud. I'll entertain a motion on that item.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. There's no discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
Oh, aye. Mr. Jeter was having a...
Councilmember Lunan? Aye. Councilmember Schneider?
Yeah, aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. And does everybody have
We're close, I
a
can't
list?
see it.
All right. The next one is Animal Services Advisory Board, 3-year terms. We have 3 terms expiring. Mr. Walter Hetzel, who is our Director of Animal Services, Jerry L. Davis, Lou Ann Anderson, all eligible for reappointment. Mr. Hetzel would like to be reappointed. Ms. Anderson would like to serve again, but asked not to be appointed chair this year. And the third individual does not want to serve beyond this term. And so we have others that are have forms on file. So it's a recommendation from the staff to reappoint Mr. Hetzel, Ms. Anderson, and we need 1 additional person, and then we need to select a chair. And the current chair has recommended that we consider Mr. Hetzel as the chair for this coming year.
Now, these board forms on file, these are folks who have said they're interested in these specific things. Okay.
On this particular board, they indicated on the form. So,
2 of them are current. I think Dr. Lawrence was filed probably 6 months ago, but the others
action. I think Linda Molstrom will do an excellent job, and she's Leadership Temple graduate. So if there's no objection, the recommendation is for Walter Hetzel to be reappointed, and that we appoint him chair, Luann Anderson to be reappointed, and Linda Molstrom to be appointed. I didn't make the motion.
Okay,
I'm just
just asking.
stating what it is that we would consider, so.
Motion to
Is there a
approve.
motion?
Well, I don't know about Mr. Hetzel being chairman, since he's down there running the show. I recommend Walter also as chair.
Okay.
That's the first and the second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem
Aye.
Howard? Councilmember Lennon?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Walter, your top dog.
And Walter, I just have to say, I like to see you at 6:30 in the morning on the TV with all those animals that you bring. Do a great job. Congratulations.
Thank you, Walter, for your willingness to do that. You do a great job. Next area is the Civil Service Commission. It's a 3-year term. They meet on a call basis only. We have one term expiring. Mr. Leibowitz has served and is not eligible for reappointment. It is recommended that Mr. Jim Boyd be recommended to fill that staff.
Make the motion that Jim Boyd be appointed to the Civil Service Commission.
Second.
Any further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. The next board is the Community Services Advisory Board. They're for 3-year terms. They meet regularly. 3 terms are expiring. Cheryl Copeland is not eligible for reappointment, and Nicole Toralva, I believe. Okay, not eligible, and Mr. Roscoe Harrison, and he is eligible for reappointment and wants to continue to serve. So we need 2 additional members, and we have one with the board form on file. That's Mr. Lamar Collins. So is there a motion for Mr. Harrison?
Make the motion for Roscoe Harris to be appointed to the Community Service Advisory Board.
Can we also appoint Lamar Collins on the same motion?
You can, if you'd like to include that in your
That's
motion. Okay. The motion is amended to include Lamar Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Roscoe Harrison and Lamar Collins to the Community Services Advisory Board. If there's no discussion, Madam Secretary. Oh,
Wait, so
okay.
we need one more position there. Okay, I have
Yes.
someone who's interested. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, just need to make sure they have.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Convention Center and Tourism Advisory Board, 3-year terms. We have 3 individuals all eligible for reappointment. 2 of the individuals would like to be reappointed, Mr. Matthew Adams, Mr. Jerry Jones, and we don't have any board forms on file at the present time, so is there a motion to reappoint Mr. Adams and Mr. Jerry Jones?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. If there's no discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Next board is the Library Board, 3-year terms. We have 1 member not eligible for reappointment and 2 members who want to not be reappointed at this time. And so, I'm sorry, and 1 of them would like to be reappointed. So we have a recommendation that Sylvia Chesser be reappointed to the Library Board, and we have 1 form on file to serve, and that's Mr. John Bailey. Is there a motion on this item?
So be it. Motion to approve.
Sylvia Chesser and John Bailey?
Right.
Right.
Okay. Have a motion to approve the appointment of Sylvia Chesser and Mr. John Bailey to fill the 3-year term. And then we'll have 1 other individual that we'll need to get in the future. So if there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Planning and Zoning Commission, 3-year terms. We have two individuals that wish to be or one individual wishes to be reappointed who is currently serving. That's Ms. Susan Luck. And we have a litany of other folks that are willing to serve. They have forms on file. We have some recommendations from the Temporary Builders Association, so entertain a motion for appointment and reappointment on that. What is your pleasure?
I'd like to reappoint Susan Luck, and I'd like to make the recommendation of Mike Pilkington and Bert Pope to be appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the appointment of Susan Luck, Mike Pilkington, and Bert Pope to fill the 3-year term positions for planning and zoning for the coming year. No further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Reinvestment Zone number 1, 2-year terms. We have 4 terms expiring at the present time, and we have all eligible for reappointment. Mr. Nix is not eligible from a standpoint if he has moved outside of the city limits, so we can take 3 of those. Mr. Janzak, Mr. Walker, and Mr. Shine are eligible and would like to be reappointed. We need 1 additional member.
I'd like to make the recommendation that Mike Thompson be appointed to the reinvestment zone for a 2-year term.
In addition to the reappointment of the 3.
Yes, sir.
So we have a motion to reappoint Marty Janzak, Bruce Walker, and Hugh Shine, and appoint Mike Thompson to the 4 positions of the reinvestment zone number 1. And we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Temple Economic Development Corporation, 3-year terms, 4 terms expiring, all individuals eligible for reappointment and wish to continue to serve if so appointed. That would be Thomas Baird, John Toon, Dr. Wade Knight, and Steve Wright. And 1 individual who was had previously served is in a position for the Temple Industrial Foundation would now serve in a large position because we don't any longer have Temple Industrial Foundation appointments.
I'll make the
Or
motion.
recommendations.
I'll make the motion to reappoint Thomas, John, and Wade, and Steve, TEDC.
Motion, second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Temple Public Safety Advisory Board, 3-year terms. We have 4 terms expiring. All are eligible for reappointment, and all wish to be reappointed. That'd be Bill Moore, Wayne Garrett, John Rood, and Marcy Davis. Is there a motion to reappoint?
Motion to reappoint those 4.
Second.
Motion and a second to reappoint those read into the record. Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. Transit Advisory Committee, 3-year terms, and I'm sorry, 2-year terms, and 3 terms are expiring, of which none are eligible for reappointment. At the present time, we have 1 form on file, 2 forms on file, Shirley Mason and Katie Mojica, and then because of the expansion of the committee to add 2 new members, 2 new positions, we will need 3 additional members in the future. So, Council, if you'll please keep an eye out, and then we're going to ask the Transit Advisory Committee to give us some recommendations since they wanted the board expanded. But at present, we have a recommendation to appoint Shirley Mason and Katie Mojica. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Schneider, do you second that one? All right. Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Aye.
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 Aye. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
I would like, before we close, I'd like Richard Terrio to come up here to the mic. And Richard, if you don't mind?
You're not going to get me in big trouble because this isn't on the agenda.
No, you're not. I just want everyone to know that, sometimes we all speak in acronyms, but when I speak of this and all throughout our city hall, the city of Temple, Woodwork, and I say Richard Terrio, people say, what does he look like? So I wanted everybody on the television to know what you look like, and also to say publicly, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've had more compliments on the woodworking in this municipal building. And also, I wanted them to look at you and let everyone know what you look like. So congratulations. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I enjoyed it, and I couldn't have done it without the entire team. David's help, council, everybody, the whole team, everybody that tried to work in the building during all this. So, but they kept the operation going, and I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Terrio.
Made us all proud.
Yeah.
And I assume we're not going to sing happy birthday again. So if there's nothing else, thank you all for being in attendance this evening. We are adjourned.